Hello everyone, welcome to today's school talk session. My name's Elizabeth and I'm one of the speech and language therapists with Evelina London's community speech and language therapy team. Today's school talk is all about supporting storytelling or narratives. It's mainly aimed at Key Stage 2 today, but you might find some of the information useful to apply to younger children in Key Stage 1 or even older children into secondary school. We are going to have a look at a top tip for supporting storytelling. We're going to look at some examples of how you can do this, and then we'll do a little activity as well. The activity today is mainly aimed for grown-ups to be able to then go and do later with your child or with a child or children who you work with. So not one really for children to join in with today, but one to do later. So let's get started. Our top tip for storytelling this week is plan before you write. That's our top tip. The idea behind this top tip is if you kind of make a bit of a plan before you start writing, it can help children who have lots of ideas to kind of refine them and get them in a kind of an order that makes sense and is easier for the listener to understand. On the flip side of that, it's useful for children who struggle to come up with ideas to kind of break that down into different parts of the story with a bit of help. It's also really useful for helping plan if there's particular vocabulary or types of vocabulary or sentence structures that are needed within a story for a classroom activity. It can be really useful to make a bit of a plan for how you're going to use some of those new words and use some of that new vocabulary within the structure of your story. So it's a really useful tip for all children, but especially useful for those children who have disordered language skills or language difficulties. So a few examples of what kinds of things you can use. So the best way to support with planning a story is to be really visual with it. So for example, one thing that you can use is just, I've got a whiteboard, but you could just use a scrap of paper. You can just divide it up into 4 parts and that already gives a bit of structure to what you're going to plan to write in your story. So you might think a bit about the who, the where, the when, and a bit about what happened. If your child or the child you work with has a bit of difficulty with kind of getting going, you can always help them with some ideas to get started. So for example, if they're struggling to think of a when, that's often kind of the most tricky one. We could get them going with maybe some suggestions. So should your story take place one sunny day, or after school, So you can use this to give them a couple of ideas of how they might get started. So that's one way that you can use a bit of a visual to get going with planning a little story. Another way that you can do that is with something a bit more detailed, so adding a little bit more detail. This is something that I just drew up earlier, so you don't need anything too fancy or high tech, just a bit of paper and a pen is fine. So again, you can see here, this one has the same ideas as the whiteboard. We've got our who, we've got our where, we've got our when or our time. I've added in here a little bit about feelings, so that can be something that goes into the start of the story. And then we can get into what happened. So what happened in the story, the bulk of the story there. And then lastly, we can think about how the story might end. So you can see here there's a bit of a pattern when we're thinking about writing stories. There's a structure to the information that needs to go at the start of the story. Before you get into the bulk of what happened, we need to introduce some of these ideas. So using a visual like this can help children make sure that they've introduced all of these ideas that they need to before launching into the rest of the story. For children who have lots and lots of ideas, sometimes this bit, what happened, is the most exciting part and the bit they can kind of jump straight into. So we just need to make sure that they've got this bit here as well to kind of introduce things and get things going. So that's just another example of one you can just make at home. One other example I have here is a little story mountain. So again, it's the same idea as before. We've got our introduction, we've got our who, our where, our when, we've got some feelings here, and then you move from the introduction up to this build up. So something new that happened, something different that happens that kind of gets the story going. Then usually the peak of the story, in the middle here, there's usually a problem. And then this is kind of the sort of exciting or interesting bit of the story. And then we move on to a bit of a resolution, coming back down the mountain, and then we can have an ending to wrap the story up and tidy it up at the end. So these are all similar ideas, just slightly different ways of presenting them. So with these examples, I've kind of given examples of how you use these in the context of story writing or kind of creative writing maybe. But these visuals and kind of using planners like these can also be really useful to help children to retell something that's happened. So it might be something like retelling their weekend news or retelling their best holiday or what they did the day before. So something like that where it's a bit kind of sharing news. Or it might be useful to use for children if there's been, I don't know, an argument in the playground or something, because this can be something that's really difficult for children with language difficulties to be able to explain if something's happened in the playground or in class. If there's been an argument or a bit of conflict, it can be really tricky for them to retell that. So using something simple like this even to kind of get going and help them to sort out in their head what exactly happened and to be able to share that information in a clear way and get that problem resolved. So those are some of my examples. We are going to move on now to our activity. So our activity today, I thought we could go through making our own story planner for an example of a piece of creative writing that your child might have to do something like this, something similar in class or finish off for homework. So today we are going to use this example here of the story mountain. That's just what we're going to use today, but feel free to kind of start anywhere, use any of these different types of resources. This is just what I've chosen that we'll use today. So our task or our creative writing lesson, I thought we could base this on the story George and George's Marvelous Medicine by Roald Dahl. So this is maybe a story that your child has covered in class, maybe not. But in the story, George is fed up with his grumpy grandma, so he makes a potion that he wants to give her to try and make her nicer and not so grumpy. But it all goes a bit wrong, and his potion has other effects and makes her grow as tall as a house. So that's a little quick overview intro to George's Marvelous Medicine. So I thought that our creative writing task for today could be, so imagine your child has to write their own story about a child discovering that they have a magical power and what kind of trouble it could cause. So let's get our story planner, our story mountain. So we'll start at the start with our introduction. So we'll start here with who. So who is in our story? So for my story today, I'm going to be writing it about a girl called Sally. So we've got Sally. And I'm next going to think about where this story is going to start. So for this story, I'm going to start it when Sally is walking to school. walking to school. Okay, next is my when. And my when for this story, I'm going to set it on a rainy morning. So I'm going to add that in, one rainy morning. Okay. Now a little bit more to our introduction is I'm going to add a little bit about how Sally's feeling this morning. So in this story, it's a bit rainy. She's walking to school and she's feeling grumpy. So this is a chance to kind of explore a little bit more vocabulary as well. So let's think, what are some other words that mean the same as grumpy or synonyms for grumpy? So maybe cranky, maybe miserable. And I'm also going to think of some more descriptive language for how we might talk about when the story is happening. So I've said one rainy morning, but maybe I could be a little bit more descriptive with that language. So I could say that it's a drizzly morning. Maybe we could have some new vocabulary. I could say it's overcast. I could say it's dreary. So that's just adding a little bit more descriptive language just to get a little bit more of that exposure to this kind of vocabulary in story writing. And you can explore all of these ideas and add a bit more of this this kind of language and vocabulary and descriptors to this plan so that your child can use it in their main story. So that kind of covers the introduction. Now, for our story, our task was that a child is going to discover that they have a magical power. So my build up, there's something new happening, is going to be that Sally, she's feeling really grumpy. She sees somebody walking towards her. And that person is smiling and waving. But Sally is feeling too grumpy to talk. So she thinks, I wish they would just disappear. And poof, there they go, they disappear. Okay, so I've just added a little bit here to our build up. So someone's walking towards Sally, they're smiling and waving, but Sally is feeling too grumpy to talk this morning. And so she thinks, oh, I wish they would just disappear, and poof, they disappear right in front of her eyes. So that's our build up. Now, this is the problem section of our story. So we're going to flesh out the story a little bit. So what happens next? What's Sally's reaction to making somebody disappear? So so we can think a little bit more now about those feelings again. So Sally might be feeling amazed or confused, or maybe she's feeling now delighted. Okay, so we've added a few more feelings. Okay, and these feelings add a little bit more descriptive language as well to the story. So Sally's going to go about her day making everybody disappear. Okay, until there's nobody left in her whole town. But then the problem is Sally starts to feel lonely. Okay, so this is our big problem of the story, is that Sally's made everyone disappear and now she feels quite lonely. So we'll start to move back down the story mountain here, and we'll think a little bit about a resolution. So what can Sally do? to resolve this problem of feeling lonely because she's made everyone disappear. So in this story, I think Sally's going to solve this problem by she realizes it was her thinking that was the secret power that made them disappear. So she realizes that this secret power, this magical power, was her thinking. So maybe she could think about people coming back. They might come back. And then again, poof, one by one, people reappear. Okay, so that's our resolution now, getting to work. So one by one, people start to reappear as Sally thinks about people coming back. This is her magical power. Okay. So we're going to move on now to the end of our story. So again, we can revisit some of those feelings that we've explored. So now, how might Sally be feeling? She might be feeling relieved. She might be feeling elated. She might be feeling excited. Yeah, so she might be feeling some of these new feelings. And the very end of our story is Sally promises not to make people disappear again. Sally promises that she will not make people disappear again. So that is how we can use a bit of a story mountain to plan out a story before you start writing it, because it can be very easy to just, if there's lots of ideas going, to just jump straight in. Or on the other side, as I said before, it can be really difficult sometimes to generate some of these ideas. So by using something like this, it just helps to really break it down, do it piece by piece, step by step. Get some of this extra language in, some of this more descriptive language, some of the emotional vocabulary, if we explore feelings throughout the story. So you can see how you can use something like this just to really plan out what is going to go into a story. So that's the end of our activity. So just to recap, today's session has been all about supporting storytelling or narratives. Our top tip is plan before you write. And you can do that by using just a bit of paper, and you can draw yourself out a story mountain or some boxes to fill, or even a whiteboard or a piece of paper just divided up like this to get going. And remember that as well as using these for something like creative writing, these can be really useful tools to help a child retell an event that's happened. So for example, an argument, or if there's been a bit of trouble in school, to be able to really get to the bottom of what's happened, because that can be something that's really tricky for children with language difficulties to retell an event like that. So using something like this can really help to get that structure out and get to the bottom of what's happened. So give it a go, and you can always let us know how you've got on in comments or by getting in touch with us. And you can, as I said, use this for lots of different types of story writing, whether it's in school, if you work with children in school, or if you are going to use this with your own child at home. So enjoy. I hope you can get creative and write some lovely stories, and we'll see you again here soon. Thanks. Bye.